Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Drak and Shadow vlog. Well, minus the shadow. This is another movie that Alex just wasn't really interested in, and so I decided to take it up on myself because, well, I started this, and I might as well finish it, and I've actually done some previous vlogs that, well, not vlogs, but I've done previous Geek News episodes that actually detail kind of my experience with it. So, welcome to the review or the vlog for Star Trek Beyond. Now, here's the thing. I have done previous episodes basically detailing my opinion on Star Trek 2009 as well as Star Trek Into Darkness. Unfortunately, though, at least one of them belongs to my college and the other one is off on a hard drive somewhere. So unfortunately, I don't have them up on YouTube. It's one of those things that I'm looking to bring the entire archive into Geek News, as well as what this show used to be called Adam's Evening of Geekery. So unfortunately, there is no point of reference. So I decided that a good starting point before we get into this would be to go into that. But first of all, if you guys have seen a previous Drak and Shadow vlog, you pretty much know how this is going to go. There's going to be spoilers ahead. I'm going to try and keep them to a minimum, like I did when I soloed Kung Fu Panda 3, but I can't give any promises. So at that point, if you guys do not want to be spoiled, go watch Star Trek Beyond if you want to, and then come back and watch the video. I promise, if you pause the video, I'll wait. All right, and with that being done, I give you a nice pause pose, so you can do that. Let's go ahead and go into my history really quick. Given my family actually grew up with Star Trek, you would think I'd be a hardcore fan. I'm actually not. Because around that time, the original series was dying down, and TNG was in its... I believe when I was a kid, it was either in its first or its second season. Whenever they stopped using the weird onesies that were being done, and then they went to the usual uniforms for the rest of the series. And unfortunately, I was more interested in things like Transformers and Voltron and giant robots. I was not interested in starships, for lack of a better term. I was more interested in starship dogfights than I was starships with drama on them, for lack of a better term. So I never jumped on the bandwagon for Star Trek: The Next Generation. And subsequently, all the other series just kind of passed me by until much later. Like, I remember watching the first season of Enterprise and being kind of 50-50 with it before my 20s, but that was about it. Until my 20s. And then, I want to say in my mid-20s is when Netflix got the licenses for all of the series. And at that point, I had enough of an interesting curiosity, because after that point, I think I had seen Star Trek 2009 and wanted to know more. So now here's the thing. Star Trek was on syndication, so I'd seen some episodes. I knew some plot lines from TNG. I knew some plot lines from Voyager and from Deep Space Nine. But I didn't know as much as a lot, or like a diehard fan did. And so I actually went back and watched, not every episode. I've skipped a few here and there, but I always, every now and then, I kick on Star Trek TNG and appreciate episodes again. So that's kind of my viewpoint. But you'll notice that I didn't mention the original series in there at all. I have tried to watch the original series who knows how many times, and I just can't get into it. I can get why people love it, but it may just be that since it's it's from the 70s, 60s, 70s, I can't get into it. It's too hokey for me. It's too dated as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how to explain it, but I just have difficulty getting into it. I tried at numerous starting points, and I just can't do it. But that's the series. The movies, I think at one point I had seen pieces of Wrath of Khan, but again, in my 20s, I actually watched all of the movies all the way through and really began to appreciate the Kirk era from the movie perspective. Granted, I have problems with some of the movies. Star Trek The Motionless Picture, I completely agree with that. I don't like it. Wrath of Khan, I love. Search for Spock, I'm not as against it as most people are. I think it's a good episode. I think it's a good movie, and with a good premise. I love Voyage Home with the humor. Final Frontier, I can't do it. It's so bad. It really is. And then we can couple it off with Undiscovered Country being pretty dang good. Generations, I can't be there. I liked it as a kid and I hate it as an adult. It's got so many problems to it. First Contact, love it. Insurrection, not so much. Again, it was one of those weird things where I liked it as a kid, but I just can't like it as an adult. I think it's a way drawn out episode and with a plot line that I don't necessarily care for. And contrary to a lot of Star Trek opinions, I like Nemesis. I've always liked Nemesis ever since I saw it. And yeah, I know there are problems with it, but I've always liked it. So that's kind of a quick bringing you up to speed to when I saw Star Trek 2009. I originally wasn't going to see it because it's the Kirk era, and I don't know anything about Kirk. Then what motivated me was I was listening to Extra Life Radio review it. And the fact that they were actually saying that there is no real connection to it, it's all alternate... Well, there is a connection, but it's all alternate timeline. I gave it another consideration. And I went and saw it. And I don't regret that. I love Star Trek 2009. Yes, it has problems, but I'm okay with it. Do I think that Leonard Nimoy Spock should be there? Probably not. But I do like the fact that we have these alternate versions, which basically gives me a fresh start. It allows for me to grow to love this Kirk, because I don't have a whole lot to go off of with William Shatner Kirk. I mean, I have the movies, but that's about it. And then Into Darkness. So I think over time this has become a 50-50 movie to people. Some people really like it and some people absolutely hate it. I'm on the like side. I get that you guys I get that a lot of people have problems with Into Darkness, but for me, I like the fact that it was an interesting take on Wrath of Khan and Space Seed, and I love the acting in it, especially from Benedict Cumberbatch. I don't think I've seen some arguments that he hammed it up horribly in it, and he may have, but I still liked it. It wasn't exactly Ricardo Montalban, but I mean, Montalban for me is Wrath of Khan, and he's hamming it up there to some extent because of all the revenge talk. So, again, I'm not against Into Darkness. I like it. I like the interesting perspectives that it provided for these characters, and even did kind of a reverse Wrath of Khan. Instead of Spock dying, it's Kirk. Granted, Kirk doesn't die in the end, but we actually did have kind of that reverse situation. How would we interact with them? But, so yeah, I liked 2009 and I liked Into Darkness. When I first saw the trailers for Star Trek Beyond, I was already very, very worried because it looked like Star Trek Mad Max Edition. And I've said it numerous times. It looked like that. I'm happy to say, though, the movie wasn't that. And I'm very happy to say that, because I'm not a Mad Max fan. I'm not a post-apocalyptic fan that much. And I was really worried that that's what they were going for because, well, success of Mad Max. And nope, they weren't going for that. So I think I've talked to you off plenty on my... That should show my history on the matter. I've liked 2009 as well as Into Darkness, and show my history with Star Trek the series. So let's go ahead and get into the movie review. So the movie starts at kind of a crossroad for a lot of characters, because they've been off doing their... I think they said they were 3 years into their 5-year exploration mission. 3 years in. So they still had another 2 to go. And they were reporting into a local starbase that had just recently been built called Yorktown. I think that's what it was called. And we start seeing some of these characters at a crossroads. Spock is at a crossroads because apparently him and Uhura are not dating anymore. We don't know why. All we know is that McCoy is making fun of him because he can't make it work. Basically just going, well, Spock, if she says it's a her problem, it's usually a you problem. Yep, that's usually how it works. And then we also get the crossroads for Kirk, because it's actually asking an honest question. I've seen some people question this, and I don't agree with the questioning. It's an honest question to ask. His dad joined because of duty. His dad joined because he felt like he could change the universe. He felt like he could do something with his life. This Kirk, I'm not talking about the Shatner Kirk, this Kirk didn't do that. This Kirk got dared onto the ship. This Kirk got told, if you want to make something with your life, then take this dare. He didn't believe in Starfleet. Even to some extent, when we see in 2009, when he's cheating on the Kobayashi Maru, he doesn't believe in it. He's trying to show that he's better in some cases. And so now that he's out there contemplating, it's an illogical question for Kirk to ask at this point. Am I as committed as my dad is to Starfleet? Which he's not really. At least at the beginning of the movie. I would say that changes at the end, but he's not as committed as the William Shatner Kirk is shown to be in the series or in the movies. He has no commitment to it, aside from, he's proven himself to be a pretty badass, and he doesn't need to prove to anybody else anymore. So at that point, we actually see them kind of making motions to separate. I think Scotty would have stayed with the ship, but Kirk was already looking to be like the vice admiral of Yorktown. He was looking more for a desk job. He didn't want to do this anymore, or he didn't want to captain a starship anymore. And Spock, we actually see a touching moment where some Vulcans pull him aside and give him a box. And we then we find out later that this is how he found out, but we basically get this little tablet of Leonard Nimoy Spock has passed away on the Vulcan colony, kind of explaining why, because of Leonard Nimoy's passing, I believe last year, he is not in this movie. And so we have that nice touching portrait of Leonard Nimoy, and it looked really good. It looked like it was a cast portrait from 2009 or maybe even Into Darkness. And it was really touching to be able to see that, because it was just kind of a reminder that, Leonard Nimoy is gone. And that Zachary Quinto's Spock is now at a loss, because he is now debating, because of the loss of Vulcan and because of how much his civilization is struggling at this point, after that, whether or not he should be in Starfleet, or should he be continuing his other me's work and trying to rebuild Vulcan civilization. And so we have that crossroad. Uhura obviously is having the relationship issues with Spock, so that's her crossroad. Sulu, we actually do get to see the infamous moment that we've heard about on Geek News, where George Takei and Simon Pegg were talking for a good couple of months on making Sulu gay. And so, but at the same time, people were confused because we were seeing pictures of a daughter. So we were going off the assumption that he'd had his daughter already, and that was a thing. What this basically did was, as soon as they got off the ship, we got to meet his significant other at a distance, and then we got to see the daughter. And it's fine. I actually had no problem with it, and not to create problems with George Takei or anything, I don't see why he had a problem. His argument was that this would tarnish Roddenberry's vision for the characters, and I get that, but I don't think Simon Pegg and the writing staff did that. And on top of that, now that I've had time to think about it, I really don't think you can call the 2009 Star Trek Roddenberry's vision. I think you can basically call it being inspired by Roddenberry's characters, because again, these are alternate timeline individuals, which means they've already had different twists and turns in their lives, and we've had that emphasized. So at that point, I'm more along the lines of, this is more J.J. Abrams' vision of these characters rather than Gene Roddenberry. I think he took inspiration from Gene, but I don't think that these are genuinely the Kirk, the Spock, the Sulu, the Uhura, and even the Chekhov that Roddenberry wrote so long ago. So I'm not trying to poke fun or anything like that. I thought the scene was fine. I really did. I thought that they handled that very well while maintaining Sulu's character, which is absolute badass as far as I'm concerned. John Cho, awesome. So we have all these crew members at a crossroads, and in the middle of them trying to figure all of this out, they get a damaged vessel with a distress call, basically saying that her entire the captain, her crew is lost on a remote planet in a dense nebula, and she needs help rescuing them. So obviously, since the only adequate, because this is a rule for Star Trek, the only adequate starship in the fleet is there, the Enterprise is sent in. And when they get there, it's very, very clear that they have been set up. And so at that point, they see what looks like a starship, but then becomes a dozen or millions of tiny drones just ripping the Enterprise apart. And it's actually kind of a sad sight to see, because after seeing the previous two movies and seeing how much hell the Enterprise has gone through, you almost want to see it come back one more time, and it doesn't. It gets ripped apart mercilessly, and it's hard to watch, especially watching it from like Kirk's perspective of he actually has to make the order to abandon ship. And I kind of get now why we have the joke of William Shatner, "I love my ship like I love a woman," because it is something like that. It's you want to make sure that the crew are okay, but at the same time, you've lost a part of yourself there. And in the meantime, while the escape pods are leaving, we're noticing that these little drones are actually picking them up. So, long story short, Enterprise gets ripped apart, the saucer section crashes on the planet, which I thought was a nice touch, that apparently the saucer section of this Enterprise can separate just like the Next Generation one could. I don't know if the previous Enterprise could do that, but okay. They land on this planet led by an individual called Crawl, who's basically, he's running the drone ships as well as he's got his own little band of pirates, mercenaries, whatever you want to call them. And so now it's up to the crew to survive. Now, a lot of the crew get picked up and put into a slave camp and basically are used as roughly food. They have this weird process where they can actually absorb the life essence out of, I'm guessing the life essence or the youth out of the crew members, and they use that to survive. So they have that, and maybe even also slave labor to an extent. But we mostly follow Kirk, Spock and McCoy, and Chekhov's with Kirk, along with the captain of the other vessel. And we also follow Scotty, as he was one of the early ones to get out, and he is then joined by Jayla, kind of the new cast member here, as she tries to keep him alive. They kind of have this uneasy alliance to work together at that point on the planet. So I'll just kind of go over the plot lines that they're doing at that point, and also Uhura, because Uhura is along with Sulu one of the captured ones. So first, let's go with the captured ones. It's basically Uhura and Crawl constantly bouncing back and forth on, you just committed an act of war on the Federation. The Federation is an act of war, and having those interactions is basically, Starfleet's going to come for us, and you're going to have to deal with this. And he's like, I am counting on it. And Sulu's kind of in that same regard. They actually try to escape a couple of times to send a distress signal, but then Crawl will manipulate the distress signal and send the ships out to a remote area of the nebula, where maybe they're going to get taken out, or maybe they're just going to sit there for days trying to look for what isn't there. The next story that we follow is Spock and McCoy, where they tried to have some character development between Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban, because they actually got on one of the alien drone ships that basically pilots like a motorcycle. This is why I thought it was Mad Max, people. But unfortunately, Spock is hurt. He's had a nice bit of metal jabbed into him, and McCoy has patched him up to whatever extent he could, but Spock's in bad shape right now, and he's getting kind of delusional and or not delusional, delirious, and trying to figure things out in his crossroad while speaking with McCoy. And that crossroad is when he brings up that, his other Spock has passed on, and he is considering leaving Starfleet to go help the Vulcans. And we also kind of figure out the reason why him and Uhura were having issues, which was he actually believed that because of his duty to the Vulcan people, it was not proper for him to be dating a human woman. He should be birthing Vulcan babies. And my personal conflict with that is that, well, technically, even if he was with Uhura, he would still be birthing Vulcan babies. They'd just be half Vulcan, and that's fine. Because half Vulcan is better than no Vulcan, as far as I'm concerned. But you can see the conflict that he's having, is that he's struggling with what he's been dealing with since 2009. His dedication to Starfleet versus his dedication to the Vulcan people. And I thought these were actually really touching moments compared to, and comparing them to Nimoy and DeForest Kelley when they would do this in the movies, and I liked it. I thought that they were good interactions between the two characters, because it allows for McCoy, who's been very kind of hateful towards Spock, to get to know him a little bit better and to show that they actually do have a friendship, not just they're just friends of a friend kind of thing. Because it always felt like to me in the movies that those two were always at each other's throats, and Kirk was what kept them together. And I never liked that dynamic. I wanted to always believe that Kirk and McCoy actually, or that the Spock and McCoy got along on their own. The third plot line is with Chekhov and Kirk, as they basically take the other captain prisoner, because it looks like she knows a little bit more than she let on. First, she makes it sound that she was a hostage, roughly, that her crew was being held hostage, and she was sent to Yorktown to bring the Enterprise back, specifically the Enterprise. And then we find out later she's just part of Krall's crew. That's the way it is. But in the meantime, we also have Kirk and Chekhov trying to figure out, okay, well, we need to get the crew back. We need to get together so that we can be able to defend ourselves and maybe even get off this planet. At that point, they run into Spock and Jayla, who, at this point, Jayla has shown to Scotty, at least, did I say Spock? Scotty, that her home is actually a downed Federation vessel. It's the USS Franklin. And she's been trying to get it back and functional so she can get off the planet, because she's a former prisoner of Krall's. She doesn't want to be there anymore. So, obviously, Chekhov and Kirk join up with them and start to help with the repairs. They then realize that they have a functioning transporter on the ship and locate Spock and McCoy, get them on the ship, get Spock healed, at least as much as they can get him healed, and then start to hatch a plan for getting all of the prisoners out of Krall's camp. And at this point, during the prison camp, we've actually had another revelation. At the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to this little device that was supposed to be a peace offering to another race. It didn't work out, but it's been kind of this object of intrigue, and when Krall went to destroy the Enterprise, he actually wanted to get this, and we haven't understood why he wanted it, but this is when, in the prison camps, we kind of figure out this device is actually part of a bigger device that has created this horrible bioweapon that the race that created it decided to hide away and take it apart and never use it. So, at this point, Krall is like, screw that, and merges the two devices together, and now has the greatest bioweapon ever. It literally leaves nothing behind. And begins the next stage of his plan, which is to take the drone ships and go to Yorktown. So basically, you can tell his goal is to wipe out the Federation. So that's going on at the slave camp. Then we head back to the Franklin, and Kirk hatches a plan with his crew to get the remaining crew members out. And it succeeds. I'm not gonna spoil that for you guys. It's really cool, and I think you guys will enjoy it. But we eventually get the crew back together and heading out in the now kind of working USS Franklin, which is, appropriately enough, it looked like the NX-01 Enterprise from Enterprise. So I thought that was a nice little nod to the past. They then head to Yorktown to stop Krall, who is now at Yorktown, from disseminating this bioweapon into the atmosphere in Yorktown and acquiring all the weapons. So they start engaging in combat with him, but then they realize that I guess the drones operate on an audio functionality, and they find a way to be able to counter those and get into Yorktown to start fighting off Krall. It's then that they actually realize a horrible revelation about Krall, is that he is actually the original captain of the USS Franklin. So like I said, when I told you guys that they were using some energy device to be able to transfer essence of life or youth from one person to themselves, and they've been using that to keep themselves alive, they've also been using it to keep themselves virtually immortal. And Krall is no different. So he actually gets onto Yorktown, and is about ready to disseminate the virus or the bioweapon until Kirk goes in to stop him. We have the da 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 fight between them, and Kirk wins in the end, and the bioweapon is sent out into space with Krall, and Krall is the only casualty that ever happens with it. I know I skipped a lot there, but it's a great action scene, and I think people will enjoy it if I don't spoil it. So we then kind of get, after we've hit this climax, we start to resolve some of these issues. We also kind of resolve the issue that I guess Kirk and Spock were going to get ready to talk to each other about the fact Kirk was looking for a desk job and Spock was looking to go help his people. And they kind of do that. We actually have Kirk go to the Admiral of Yorktown and basically deny his application for Vice Admiral because he's decided he wants to be a captain, and he's found his reason. He's found his reason for loving this just as much as his dad did. Spock, then we get a really touching moment that kind of symbolizes the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, which is this year. We open up the box. So like I said before, there was a tablet and there was a box. The tablet had the portrait. The box had a lot of this other Spock's personal belongings. One of which was an original photo, I believe, from Star Trek VI, with the original cast. So this is the first time that Zachary Quinto has seen this Spock's Enterprise crew. And we don't have him shed a tear, but you can see that he has kind of this sense of longing, as if he wanted to know these people just as much as his counterpart did. And we also have a bit of a focus on Leonard Nimoy. And I saw a lot of people, including myself, that just shed a tear for this cast photo. Because I believe Leonard well, he may not be the first casualty, but, you know, you look back on it and DeForest Kelley isn't with us anymore. I think the guy who played Scotty isn't with us anymore. Nichelle Nichols is getting up there near, so is Bill. And it's so... It brings such a sense of fondness to how these cast members used to look. And you can see it in Zachary Quinto Spock's eyes. And I thought it was a really touching moment and a great homage to the 50th anniversary and all that came before. And so we start resolving some of these issues, which is where Spock and Kirk wanted to talk to each other about their transfers and whatnot. They've decided that they're going to stay with Starfleet. They're going to stay in the same crew, and they're going to continue to explore and all that. We even get to have Uhura and Spock get back together because Spock wants to be with her. We have McCoy kind of being the glue that holds everybody together. We also have some good moments with Chekhov and with Scotty. And then we end out on, in my opinion, the best opening monologue that Star Trek has ever done, which actually incorporated all of the crew members into saying space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go and ending out with Uhura where no one has gone before. It was a really touching moment and a nice legacy to the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And wow, I'm even getting kind of a little choked up now that I'm thinking back on it. It was a really great moment to see the Enterprise kind of reconstructed and having them do that monologue. A nice touching moment to the 50th anniversary. And that pretty much wraps up the movie. Now, I will also say that not only was there a dedication at the end to Leonard Nimoy, but also to Anton Yelchin, who recently passed away due to an accident. And also, since then, we've already heard about a prequel Star Trek movie that would be following George Kirk, which I think is actually a great thing to do, considering that we actually got kind of invested in him in 2009, and not a whole lot of resolution there. Aside from from Nimoy Spock telling us that George Kirk watched a lot of Bill Shatner's Kirk's finest moments, him commanding the Enterprise and all that. So that's pretty much the movie. I will admit, like I said, I walked into this thinking it was going to be Star Trek Mad Max, and I didn't want it to be that. And I'm happy to say it isn't. It never was. All the Mad Max moments are just them trying to survive on this planet and trying to get off of it. And it all makes sense with it. Yeah, there's motorcycles, but you know what? Considering the emphasis on this Kirk's need to be a little extreme is there, and it makes sense why we had those motorcycle moments, especially when you take that action scene into Accord. So I love the shots of it. I love the story that they tried to convey here, that they tried to show that separation. They tried to show crew members actually questioning why they came together to be the Enterprise crew and why that was a good thing. If I were to say I had any dislikes with it, I thought Krall was kind of weak as a villain, because especially like if he was just a random alien, I would have been fine with it. Maybe he'd had a bad run-in with the Federation. The reveal that he ends up being a former Federation captain who has a military past, it kind of felt, and that's really sad of me to say because he's being played by Idris Elba, and I love Idris Elba in Pacific Rim and in the Thor movies. And I don't want to say that he's bad, but I just think that the character itself was kind of weak in the fact that if it had just been an alien being, I would have been okay with it. If he was just a conqueror and you had to take him out, fine. But then they had to do this loose allusion to Starfleet, and it just didn't fit with the character that they'd created. Like I said, I mean, when they first introduced Krall, if they had just said, you know, his race was destroyed by the Federation by accident, I would have been okay with it, or deliberately, I would have been okay with it. But that's not the case. He's just a military guy who's evil because he's a military guy. And I wasn't okay with that. So that's like my legit dislike of the film. I also kind of dislike that we had more emphasis, again, on the trinity of characters, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, with a little bit of Uhura mixed in, than we did on characters like Sulu, on Chekhov, and on Scotty. Scotty got a little bit more of a focus than the other two, but Chekhov, like, we actually see that Chekhov's dealing with relationship problems on the ship, never really addressed. I'm not saying that we could do stuff on Sulu being gay. It would have been interesting if they did, just because of his daughter, but I did want more moments of Sulu being badass, because 2009 and Into Darkness gave us these moments. And in this one, we basically got one moment where they're getting ready to launch the USS Franklin. Everybody's seen it in the trailers. And Kirk's like, Sulu, you're sure you can fly this, right? Are you kidding me, sir? That's all we got. And I was actually kind of disappointed by that. So that's kind of my prime dislikes for the film. It does have some faults with shots. It does have some faults with audio, things like that. But they're few and far between, and they don't hurt the immersion that badly. And so with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and go into my final assessment, which is my score. On Star Trek Beyond, I would have to give it a solid... I think I gave it an 8 last night on Geek News, but I've since kind of revised that, and I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's a solid B. I can already tell people, like, if you're a brand new fan coming to Star Trek and you haven't seen 2009, Beyond is not a good place to start. I would say start with 2009 and move your way through. If you're a fan of the 2009 movies and maybe even had problems with Into Darkness, I think you'll like Beyond. I think there's enough there that you will appreciate it. Star Trek fans, I think you're gonna have lots of issues, but I'm hoping that they're issues that you can put aside to be able to enjoy the 50th anniversary of Star Trek and being able to celebrate all of the things that are going to be coming because of these movies, including a new series. So that's why I'm giving it a solid 8.5. I think it's a solid B plus for a movie. It does have problems, but it at least does what it needs to do. So with that being said, now we usually do this on the Drak and Shadow vlogs where I recommend how much money being spent on this movie. I really don't have anything to recommend aside from keep it on the matinee side. Unless you're a diehard Star Trek fan and you want to be able to see this in 3D or whatever, matinee's the best price for you. Star Trek fans, you're going to see this in 3D. I don't even need to tell you that. You're going to do it. I was even tempted to go see this in 3D just to see some of the Enterprise moments. But it's a solid matinee buy for you guys. And that's going to go ahead and do it. I think I've talked you guys' ear off enough on Star Trek Beyond. I hope I've made a good case for it, for Star Trek fans to come back and see Beyond. Even the naysayers who were just as concerned about the trailer as I was. I think you'll get a good experience out of it. And that's going to go ahead and do it for me. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. I hope I continue to... Me and the Shadow Blazer don't show it enough, but we continue to appreciate all the things that you do for us, continuing to watch our videos, continuing to contribute to the content, and continuing to help us out by liking the videos, and continuing to recommend us to your friends and family. We always appreciate it, and I don't think we show it enough, but we really do love and appreciate you guys for continuing to stick with us throughout these many years. And with that being said, I'm Drak, my friend, and my friends. I will see you guys next time for the next video.